What would you do if the person you trusted most, your own sister, stole not just your dream wedding dress, but the future you had been planning your whole life? Could you forgive a betrayal that cuts deeper than blood? Could you still believe in family when the person standing next to you at every childhood birthday, every whispered secret at night, decided your happiness was something she deserved more? My name is Sienna Rowe. I'm 27 years old, and a few months ago, I thought I was about to have the wedding that every little girl dreams about. The kind with music that floats like magic, a dress that feels like a second skin, and a day where nothing, absolutely nothing, could go wrong. I'm sharing this story not because I'm looking for pity or even forgiveness. I'm sharing it because sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the faces we trust most, and when it does, it tears apart not just relationships, but the very foundation of who you thought you were. If hearing my story makes someone else out there feel less alone when trust shatters, then it's worth every painful word I'm about to say. It started with a dress, but it ended with a choice I never thought I'd have to make. For most of my life, it was just me and my younger sister Lila. Two girls, two sides of the same coin. I was the careful one, the planner, the dreamer who needed every detail lined up neatly before I made a move. Lila was the spark. Wild, beautiful, unpredictable. She could light up a room with her laughter or disappear from it without warning. We grew up in a small town where people still remembered your birthday without needing Facebook to remind them. Our parents, Peter and Mary Ann, ran the town's only bookstore. It wasn't a big place, but it smelled like ink and hope. And in a way, it raised us as much as they did. After school, Lila and I would sit behind the counter, sneaking pieces of licorice and inventing stories about the customers who wandered in. We were close, not perfect, no siblings are, but close enough that I never thought there would be a day she would choose herself over me. Never. When Daniel Whitmore proposed to me, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who made grand gestures in front of crowds. But he was steady, kind, someone who made promises carefully and kept them fiercely. He proposed on a cold November evening in the bookstore where we grew up. He knelt between the shelves of poetry, holding out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. I said yes before he even finished the question. Lila had been the first person I called. She screamed so loud over the phone that I had to pull it away from my ear. She cried. She promised she'd help me plan every single detail. "You're going to be the most beautiful bride," she said. "No one will ever forget this day." And for a while, I believed her. The dress came later. Finding it wasn't easy. I tried on dozens, hundreds maybe. Some were beautiful but didn't feel like me. Some looked perfect in photos but hollow in the mirror. Some made me cry for all the wrong reasons. Then one afternoon, after a long day of fittings that left me questioning whether I even wanted a wedding at all, we found it. It wasn't even on display. It was tucked away in a corner of a boutique on the edge of town, almost like it was waiting for me. Ivory silk, hand-stitched lace along the bodice, a train that looked like it could carry every dream I ever dared to hope for. I stepped into it, and for the first time, I saw the version of myself I always hoped would appear. Not perfect, but radiant, alive, worthy. Lila cried the moment she saw me in it. "Oh my God, Sienna," she whispered. You." I cried too, not because I doubted it, but because for once, I didn't. We put down the deposit that afternoon. It was a one-of-a-kind piece, no copies, no second chances. I remember signing the paperwork, my hand shaking slightly, thinking, this is it. This is really happening. If I had known what was coming, I might have taken a longer look at that moment, held it closer, because it was the last pure thing I had between us. Planning the wedding should have been the happiest time of my life. Instead, it became the first ripple in a storm I didn't see coming. Lila became distracted, harder to reach. She missed appointments she'd promised to help with, forgot to return calls, made excuses that felt thinner each time. "She's just busy," Daniel said when I mentioned it. And maybe she was. Life doesn't stop because someone's getting married. Work piles up. Friends need attention. But there was something more. A shift. a tension in her voice I couldn't name yet but felt in my bones. I ignored it. Because that's what you do with family. You trust. You hope. You forgive the small cracks and tell yourself they're not signs of something bigger. Until they are. The day it all broke was 3 weeks before the wedding. It started with a text from an old classmate, someone I hadn't seen in years. "Hey, Sienna, congrats! Didn't know you were getting married this weekend. Saw your sister's pics. She looked amazing in that dress." Confused, I opened the message. Attached was a blurry photo of Lila in a wedding dress. My wedding dress. The exact one. Same ivory silk. Same lacework. Same dream I thought belonged to me. My stomach twisted so hard I nearly dropped the phone. No, it couldn't be. Maybe it was a mistake. A prank. Maybe she had tried on something similar for fun. Maybe... My hands were shaking as I called her. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. Nothing. It was Daniel who found the confirmation. Scrolling through social media, piecing together what my sister hadn't even tried to hide. Lila had gotten married. A small ceremony. Barely 20 people. Someone had live-streamed it. And there she was, standing under a makeshift archway, wearing the dress I chose. Smiling the smile I had dreamed would be mine on the day I said, "I do." Marrying a man I didn't even know she was dating. Or maybe I did. A memory flickered. Mason Carter, an old friend from school. The boy I used to sit next to on the swings, sharing dreams and popsicles. The boy I had once imagined growing old with, back when forever was a promise kids made and believed in. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been yanked out of the world. Daniel tried to take my phone away, tried to tell me to sit down, to breathe, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding like fists against a locked door. How? Why? Why would she do this? Had I missed something? Had I been so blinded by my own happiness that I didn't see hers curdling into something else? Or was it never about her happiness at all? Was it just about having what I had? No. Worse. Was it about taking it? The next morning, I drove to Lila's apartment. I didn't call first. I didn't text. I wasn't going to give her time to spin a story, or gather her excuses, or hide behind half-truths the way she always had when we were kids. I wanted to look her in the eye and ask her one question. Why? The sky was gray, the air thick with late spring heat. The kind that pressed against your skin like it wanted to be noticed. My palms were slick on the steering wheel, but I kept driving. Past the coffee shop we used to sneak out to in high school. Past the bookstore where she once made me cry because she read my journal and laughed at what I'd written about Mason. I should have seen it then, but I didn't want to. Because loving Lila meant making space for the things I didn't understand, for the parts of her that bruised and burned, but still felt like home. But this? This wasn't a bruise. This was a blade. She opened the door barefoot, mascara smudged, wearing a t-shirt that wasn't hers. The moment she saw me, her face shifted. Not in guilt, not in panic. Something colder, something prepared. "Hey," she said quietly, stepping aside. "I figured you'd come." I walked past her into the living room. The place was a mess. Shoes scattered. Wrapping paper still on the floor. A single bouquet of white roses wilting on the counter. I stared at them, at the empty champagne bottle beside them. "Where is it?" I asked. Lila didn't pretend not to know what I meant. She walked into the bedroom and returned with the dress. It was on a hanger, still pristine. She held it like it was fragile, like it deserved reverence. I wanted to rip it from her hands and set it on fire. Instead, I sat down. "You didn't even tell me," I whispered. "You didn't tell me you were engaged, or seeing him, or anything. And then I find out, like that?" Lila looked down at the dress, fingers tightening slightly. "I wasn't going to wear it," she said. "At first, I swear, I went to the boutique because I wanted to see it again. That moment with you, it was real, Sienna. You looked beautiful. I was proud of you. I waited. But then, I put it on. She swallowed hard. And it fit. Like it belonged to me, too. And I wanted something. For once, I wanted something that wasn't your hand-me-down, not the schools you picked, not the jobs you got first, not the guys who looked at you before they noticed me. I wanted something that had been yours. And I wanted it to be mine. My throat closed. I loved that dress, I said. I know. You knew what it meant to me, what it represented, and you took it anyway. She nodded slowly. Because for once, I didn't want to be the sister standing behind you. I wanted to be the one people looked at and said, "She's the bride. She's the moment." I laughed, bitter and broken. You stole a dream I built my whole life for, Lila. You didn't take a dress. You took the feeling, the one thing that was supposed to be mine and only mine. There was a silence. Not the kind we used to share at night, when our beds were just a few feet apart and we whispered about boys and books and forever. This was a silence with teeth. She looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something real in her eyes. Regret, maybe not enough, but real. I didn't do it to hurt you, she said. But you did, I replied. I stood to leave. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to scream. I didn't even want to make her feel worse. I just wanted to breathe again, somewhere far from the version of family that had turned me into a question mark. But as I reached the door, she called out, "I still have your veil." I turned. What? She walked over to a nearby chair, lifted the delicate tool piece I hadn't even realized was missing from the bridal box, and held it out. "I didn't wear it," she said. "I couldn't." I stared at it, and for one brief, bitter second, I saw the girl she used to be, the one who followed me everywhere, who begged to play dress-up in my clothes, who cried the day I left for college because she said the house felt too quiet without me. But that girl was gone. Maybe she'd been gone longer than I realized. I took the veil, not because I wanted it, but because it was mine, and I wasn't ready to let go of everything just yet. Back in my car, I didn't drive away immediately. I sat with the veil in my lap, staring at the faint stain near the hem, wondering how many stories we tell ourselves to make betrayal feel like something we can live with. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, but hurt isn't erased by intention. It lives in the empty space between who someone was to you and who they chose to be instead. I postponed the wedding the next day. Daniel was kind, understanding. More than I deserved, really. "I'll wait," he said, taking my hand, "as long as it takes." But the truth was, I didn't know if I could walk down that aisle anymore. Not in that dress. Not with those pictures in my head. Not while the ghost of my sister stood behind me in lace and silk, whispering, "It should have been me." People think calling off a wedding is about embarrassment, that it's about returning gifts or canceling the caterer, or how many people you'll have to text and say, "Change of plans." But no one talks about what it's like to wake up the next morning in a house full of silence, a closet full of dresses that won't be worn, a fridge full of champagne no one will open, a heart so full of confusion that even breathing feels like betrayal. The morning after I postponed the wedding, I sat on my bedroom floor in the same sweatshirt I'd worn to bed, legs curled under me like I was trying to disappear into the carpet. Daniel brought me coffee, kissed the top of my head, and didn't ask questions. I loved him for that, and hated that I couldn't love him harder, louder, enough to ignore the storm still spinning inside me. The truth was, I didn't know how to celebrate love in a family where betrayal was dressed in silk and called sisterhood. By the third day, the calls started coming in. Not from friends. They already knew. Not from guests. I'd sent a quiet, polite note to everyone with a vague message about postponement due to personal circumstances. No, the calls came from family. My mother first. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice already tight with a tone I knew too well, the one she used when we were in public and she wanted me to smile. "This is not the end of the world." "I didn't say it was," I replied. "You're letting emotions get in the way of a moment that should be about joy, about union, about grace under pressure." I blinked. "Grace?" I said. "She wore my dress, Mom." She was confused. "She got married in it." There was a long pause. Then, "People make mistakes. She's your sister." That word, sister, felt like a bruise I couldn't cover. She didn't just borrow a shirt. She stole a moment that took me a lifetime to imagine. My mother sighed. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said. "I'm asking you to think of the bigger picture. Family, reputation. The Whitmores are expecting this wedding." Of course, because nothing says celebration like a woman forced to smile through a fracture no one else wants to look at. I hung up, not angrily, just slowly, like I was disconnecting from more than a call, like I was finally hearing the truth in the subtext. They didn't want healing, they wanted compliance. The next few days passed like fog. Daniel went back to work. I stayed home, sorting through wedding things like they belonged to someone else. Thank you cards, seating charts, a playlist I no longer recognized. I stared at the veil every morning. I couldn't bring myself to pack it away, but I also couldn't look at it without tasting ash. Then, one afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my aunt standing there, my mother's sister, a woman who had always been half in the family, half outside of it, the one who drank too much wine at dinners and told stories no one wanted repeated. She held a small tin of cookies in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. "I won't stay long," she said, "but I need to tell you something." We sat at the kitchen table. The cookies were untouched. The envelope sat between us like a ticking clock. "I know what happened with Lila," she said. "I'm sure everyone does." "No, I mean, I know more than what she wants people to think." I looked at her. Aunt Ruth had always been blunt, messy, the kind of woman who wore leopard print to funerals and didn't care if you noticed. "I was there," she said. "At the dress shop. The second time." My stomach turned. "She told me she was going to surprise you. Said she wanted to feel what it was like to wear something that made her feel powerful. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think she'd actually go through with it." I waited. "She lied to your mom," Ruth continued. "Told her you'd given her the dress, that it was a backup you didn't want. Your mom believed her, or pretended to." My chest tightened. "She used my name," I whispered, "to justify what she stole." Ruth reached for the envelope. "She also left this behind. A note. She didn't mean for you to see it, but I'm giving it to you anyway." Inside was a folded piece of paper, handwriting I knew by heart, Lila's. One line stood out. "If Sienna knew everything I've given up for her, she wouldn't hate me for taking one thing back." I stared at the words until they blurred. "What does that mean?" I asked. Ruth looked down. "I think it means she's been living in your shadow longer than any of us wanted to admit, and she resents it. Not just the dress. Everything." "But I never asked for that," I said. "I never tried to be better than her." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes people don't resent what you do. They resent what you represent." That night, I sat in the backyard alone, wrapped in an old blanket, the letter in my lap. I kept hearing her voice, the tone she used when we were little and she begged to borrow my clothes, the way she pouted when teachers praised me, the silence she gave me after I got into the college she didn't. I hadn't seen it then, because I believed love was enough. That sisterhood could survive anything, but I was starting to wonder, what if love wasn't supposed to survive silence? What if we were just two people forced into a box called family and expected to stay there no matter how much it hurt? The next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to the family brunch. I wasn't going to sit beside my sister and pretend we hadn't burned something sacred. And I wasn't going to be the girl who swallowed betrayal just because it came from someone who shared my blood. The brunch was supposed to be a celebration. That's what the invitation said. Rowe Whitmore's Family Brunch, celebrating love, grace, and unity. 3 words that had never felt farther from the truth. Daniel's mother had called me the night before, gently asking if I'd reconsider coming. Not because she didn't understand, but because she feared that my absence would make the whispers louder. "Sienna," she said, "you don't owe anyone your forgiveness. But sometimes presence speaks louder than absence." I didn't know if I agreed, but I went. Not for grace, not for unity, for clarity, for the chance to look my family in the eyes and see who still deserved the word. The restaurant was all white linen and polite lighting. Champagne glasses glimmered under soft chandeliers. People hugged, kissed cheeks, said things like, "So happy for both girls," and "What a beautiful season for love." They spoke in layered performances. They wore celebration like armor. And in the middle of it all was Lila, wearing pale pink, the color of innocence, or surrender depending on the light. When she saw me, her face froze, just for a second. Then she smiled, like nothing had happened, like we weren't carrying a fracture big enough to swallow the room. "Sienna," she said, "you came." I did. Daniel stayed near me, a quiet presence of calm in a storm I hadn't named yet. My mother approached next, dressed impeccably, lipstick precise, expression unreadable. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, "for choosing family over drama." I blinked, and that's when something in me snapped. Not loudly, not with a scene, but with a truth so sharp it didn't need volume to cut. "Is that what you think this is?" I asked. "That I'm choosing family?" She hesitated. "I think you're doing the right thing." "No," I said, clear and steady. "What I'm doing is showing up. And that's different." My father came over then, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Sienna, maybe now's not the time." "No," I said again, louder. "Now is exactly the time." I turned to the group, to the table of cousins and aunts and neighbors and family friends who had all shown up, smiling, pretending that nothing had happened. I let the silence fall first, let it settle like fog. Then I said, "You all showed up to celebrate a wedding that didn't happen, and a second one that wasn't supposed to, but no one's asked why. No one's asked what it costs a woman to give up a day she planned her whole life just so her sister could pretend she didn't steal it. No one's asked what it means when silence is expected of the person who was hurt and forgiveness is demanded like a performance. You ask me to sit beside her, to toast, to smile, but I wonder, how many of you would have said something if it were your dress, your wedding, your sister?" The room was still, unmoving. Lila's face had fallen. Tears welled, but she didn't speak, and neither did I. Not anymore. Because I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to stop pretending. I left before dessert. Daniel followed, hand in mine, saying nothing. And that silence, his, was the only kind I welcomed now. The next day, I made 2 appointments, one with the boutique to return the veil, and one with a new venue, smaller, simpler, somewhere far from the shadows of what should have been. I didn't know the date yet, or the dress, but I knew this. My wedding would be mine, not as a reclaiming, not as a protest, but as a beginning, on my terms, with no borrowed lace, no stolen vows, no blood debts disguised as family, just love, earned, honest, and finally, free. Starting over is not as romantic as people make it sound. There's no music swelling in the background, no epiphany moment where you toss your old life out the window and suddenly feel free. There's just the quiet realization that you have to choose yourself, deliberately, stubbornly, one decision at a time, and that includes choosing how you want to begin again. For me, that meant facing something I'd been avoiding since the brunch, the question. Not why did she do it, I already knew, but rather, what was I going to do now? What do you do when the day you've imagined your entire life is now covered in dust, regret, and someone else's perfume? You change the day. I didn't want another wedding, not in the traditional sense, not the kind with a rehearsal dinner and a flower girl and nervous speeches over glasses of Pinot Grigio. I didn't want anyone walking me down an aisle who thought silence was love and appearances were peace. I wanted something small, real, something I could carry without breaking. So I called Daniel. "Hey," I said, voice softer than I meant. "I want to get married, not in a year, not in a church, just us, and the people who stayed." There was a pause, then a breath, then, "Okay, let's do it." And just like that, we began. I didn't hire a planner this time. I didn't want perfection. I wanted intention. We picked a little cottage garden an hour outside the city, where the trees curled around the ceremony space like old friends and the air smelled like rosemary and riverstone. The venue only held 20 people. That was enough. 20 people who had called me when I disappeared, who had said, "You don't owe anyone anything but your truth," who didn't ask, "But what about your sister?" Daniel's parents were first on the list. My Aunt Ruth was second. Everyone else filled in like pieces that had always fit. Quiet, steady, certain. And then there was the dress. It sat in a box under my bed for weeks, not the stolen one. That was never returned. Lila had the nerve to ask if I wanted it back. I said no before the question even finished. No, I'm talking about the second dress. The one I bought in a panic after postponing the first wedding. Safe, plain, white. I took it out one morning, stared at it under the window light, and realized it made me feel nothing. And I'd had enough of nothing. So I went shopping alone. No Pinterest board, no entourage, no pressure. Just me, a quiet fitting room, and a mirror that no longer felt like a courtroom. That's when I saw it, hanging by itself near the back, a deep, smoky shade of slate blue. Simple lines, bare shoulders. A whisper of softness at the waist like it had been made to move, not pose. It wasn't white, but it was me. And for the first time in months, I smiled without guilt. When I showed the dress to Daniel, he just stared for a moment. Then he said, "That's the one you wear when you're not trying to impress anyone. Just yourself." I kissed him, not because he was right, but because he saw me. The way I hadn't let myself be seen in weeks. The week before the wedding, my mother called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. She didn't ask about the dress. She didn't ask if she could come. She just said, "Are you happy?" I paused, then said, "Yes." Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time I wasn't carrying anyone else's silence. She didn't say much after that. Just, "Then I'll be thinking of you." I said thank you, and I meant it. The night before the ceremony, I sat outside the cottage with a notebook in my lap. Not to write vows. We'd agreed to speak from the heart, but I needed to write something for myself. A letting go. So I wrote a list, not of what I'd lost, but of what I refused to carry forward. I will not wear shame stitched by someone else. I will not define family by blood alone. I will not apologize for the pieces of me that took too long to bloom. I will not let her name echo louder than my own. I will not wear white, because I am not starting over. I am continuing. I tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it inside my dress bag. Not for the world, just for me. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to birdsong. Not alarms, not emails, not noise trying to rush me into someone else's timeline. Just the hush of leaves swaying through an open window and the soft creak of wood beneath my bare feet. I walked outside before anyone else was awake. The garden was already dressed, not in perfection, but in presence. Dew sparkled on the grass like someone had scattered tiny pieces of hope across the earth. The chairs were simple, placed in a loose semicircle beneath an old oak tree. No stage, no aisle, just space. That was the whole point. I didn't want to be walked toward Daniel like an offering. I wanted to walk beside him from the start. And I did. When the time came, I stepped out in my slate blue dress, holding a small bouquet of herbs, rosemary for remembrance, lavender for calm, sage for letting go. People turned, not with gasps, not with applause, just stillness, respect. I didn't need to be admired. I needed to be seen. And I was. Daniel met me halfway. His eyes didn't widen with surprise at the dress. He already knew, but there was something in his gaze, a quiet kind of awe that told me everything I needed to hear. You don't have to be what they expected. You just have to be real. The ceremony was brief, just voices. No readings from poems we didn't feel. No unity candle. No forced laughter. Just promises. He went first. "I don't love you because you survived what you did," he said. "I love you because even in the middle of it, you chose kindness. You didn't hide your hurt. You let it make space inside you, and you still opened that space for me. My voice shook when it was my turn. I thought I had to be perfect to deserve this, I said, to deserve you, but I don't. I just have to be here, brave enough to be known, and willing to be loved, not in spite of my story, but because of it. And then we were married. No orchestra swelled, no confetti flew, just hands held, just a kiss that felt like soil, soft, grounding, alive. At the reception, we didn't throw a bouquet. We gave each guest a stone, flat, smooth, marked with one word we'd chosen for them. Mine said, belonging. Ruth cried when she read hers. Truth. Daniel's mom held hers like it might shatter. Permission. People stayed late. No one talked about dresses. No one asked about Lila. And if they thought about it, they didn't say. Because sometimes healing isn't about fixing the broken. It's about building something new next to it. Steady, slow, and sacred. That night, I stood barefoot in the garden under the string lights and said goodbye. Not to the wedding I'd lost, but to the version of me who thought her worth depended on how perfectly she fit into someone else's frame. I wasn't a bride in white. I was a woman in blue, not washed in tradition, but wrapped in choice. And I've never felt more married to my own truth. It happened on a Tuesday. I had just left the bakery near our street, holding a box of croissants and 2 lattes for Daniel and me. The air was soft that morning. One of those late spring days that feels like it borrowed something gentle from autumn. I wasn't thinking of her. That's the honest truth. I hadn't thought about Lila in weeks. Not in the way I used to. Not like a wound pressed under the skin. These days, when her name crossed my mind, it was quiet, dull, like a name I read once in a book I never finished. But then she was there, on the sidewalk, hair pulled back, a scarf knotted loosely around her neck. She wasn't alone. Someone walked a few steps behind her, laughing at something she said, but her eyes, when they locked onto mine, didn't laugh. They froze. And I stopped walking. We stood like that for a moment. Strangers who once knew everything. Women who had once whispered secrets through a shared bedroom wall and now couldn't even cross the space of a sidewalk. She stepped forward, and I let her. "Hi," she said. I nodded. "I wasn't sure if you'd stop." I almost didn't. She looked down at her shoes, then back up. "You got married." I didn't respond. I saw the photos. The dress it was beautiful. Still, I said nothing, because I didn't need her to validate what I had chosen for myself. Not anymore. "I'm glad you're happy," she added. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't know if I am." She hesitated. "True, I guess I'm hoping you are. That makes one of us." She blinked, and I could tell this wasn't the conversation she expected. She probably thought I'd offer her a second chance, or a quiet, bitter smile with words like, "I forgive you," tucked inside it. But I had spent too long learning how to stop making pain comfortable for other people. So I stood there, unflinching. "Why did you do it?" I asked. She looked up, surprised. "I already told you." "No," I cut in calmly. "You gave me reasons, but you never gave me truth. Why that dress? Why that day? Why him?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and then said something that almost sounded real. "Because it felt easier to be you than to be invisible." There it was, a confession not of cruelty, but of collapse. But it didn't move me, because knowing someone is drowning doesn't make it okay when they pull you under just to keep their head above water. I took a step closer. "You know what the hardest part was?" I said. "It wasn't the dress. It wasn't the wedding. It was realizing that I had been building my life around a sister who saw me as competition instead of home." Her eyes welled. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," I said. "And you didn't stop. Not when it mattered. Not when it could have changed something." She said nothing. And maybe that was the first honest moment between us in years. The man she was with walked up, awkward smile on his face. "Everything okay?" he asked. She turned to him. "Yeah, just..." My sister. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. Because no one ever fully does when it comes to sisters. We're the ones who know where the other is softest, where the deepest cracks run, and where to press when we want to be remembered, even in pain. I looked at her one last time and said what I came to say. I'm not angry anymore. She blinked. I'm not forgiving you either. Then I turned and walked away. Not with satisfaction, but with something softer, a release. Because I finally understood that closure doesn't always come from apologies. Sometimes it comes from choosing what we no longer have to carry. And her name? It didn't ruin me. It reminded me what I deserve to protect. The funny thing about healing is that it doesn't always feel like a crescendo. It's not loud. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or applause. It's not a speech, or a confrontation, or even a perfect ending. It's quiet. It's waking up and realizing you haven't thought about someone in days. It's sitting in a room where they once took up space and feeling peace, not absence. It's writing their name down and not needing to tear it up afterward. That was where I found myself, weeks after seeing Lila on the street. Not triumphant, not bitter, just free. I didn't tell anyone about the encounter. Not Daniel, not my mother, not even Ruth. Because some endings don't belong to the crowd, they belong to the self. And I'd earned this one. One afternoon, while cleaning out a box of old wedding things, I found something I had forgotten. A card, handwritten, meant for Lila, meant to be given to her the morning of my wedding, the original one, before everything collapsed. It read, "You were my first best friend, my mirror, my echo. I always thought no matter where life took us, you'd be the one beside me on the biggest day of my life. I'm so lucky to call you my sister." I read it once, twice. Then I picked up a pen and added 4 more lines beneath it. But not all mirrors reflect truth, and not all echoes deserve to last. I'm no longer lucky. I'm just learning who I can trust to stay. Then I folded it, and I burned it. Not out of spite, but to make space for new pages. In the weeks that followed, I started something small. A journal. Not one full of memories of her, but memories of me. Moments where I had chosen differently. Moments when I had walked away. Moments when I had stood still and let grief move through me instead of around me. I filled it slowly. Not daily, but honestly. And one day, near the back, I wrote a sentence I hadn't dared to believe before. She is no longer the center of the story. I am. And that was enough. I don't hate Lila. I don't think I ever truly did. Hurt and hate aren't twins. They just wear the same shoes sometimes. But I don't love her either. At least not in the way I used to. Unquestioning, all-forgiving, endlessly elastic. I love the version of us that once existed. I honor it. But I don't need to resurrect it. Some things are meant to stay buried, not out of shame, but out of mercy. Daniel and I travel sometimes now. Nothing extravagant, little places, quiet cities, towns that smell like old bread and new beginnings. And every time we go somewhere new, I find a local bookstore. I pick one novel I've never heard of, and I write my name inside the cover. Not Sienna Rowe Whitmore, just Sienna, because that's the name I built myself back under. That's the name that stayed when everything else left. People ask me sometimes if I'd ever invite her back in, if I'd ever rebuild. I always answer the same way. Some bridges burn, others just dissolve, and some were never mine to cross in the first place. And yet, even after everything, if you asked me what I believe in now, I'd say this. I still believe in sisters, but not the kind you're given. The kind you choose, the kind who choose you back, without stealing your dreams, without asking you to shrink, without saying, blood is thicker, like it's a law you never signed. The kind who build tables beside you, who pour the tea, who stay to listen. That's the kind of sisterhood I'll pass on, one day. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to begin again.